So we set up in the private sector our own emergency operations center with 3 goals in mind. We felt that in order to reduce risk, we needed better coordination within the private sector in the Philippines and across from the private sector to the government and the private sector to international humanitarian organizations. The second goal was we needed to improve the capacity, build up capacity, and empower private companies to become more resilient themselves. So this started with their own staff and management. And then goal 3 was working with their supply chain, the SMEs, because in this country, 99.5% of establishments are really MSMEs. We built it around what we call the cluster system. So just like the government and just like the international system, which has committees or clusters, they have 12. In our case, we focused on 8. The 8 where the business community had a strong role to play in. So for the Philippines, because the utility businesses are basically privatized, we needed to organize each sector. So we had power, water, telecom, and infrastructure, but we also added food and non-food supplies, finance and insurance, search and rescue and medical, logistics, and so we completed the 8. The list is a little fine, the print, but those are the companies that we have working with us. So we have about 100 companies in the network. We made sure that one of our goals was to be interoperable and be able to work closely with the government and with the UN system, for instance. So we made sure that we could work across from committee to committee. We sit on the NDRRMC, various committees of NDRRMC, which is the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council, but we also interact with international agencies and the UN system. We use a lot of technology, and we feel that we need to be up to date with information, with data, with knowledge, to use it for scenario planning. So, for instance, we work closely with PHIVOLCS, the Philippine Volcanology Institute, for the Rapid Earthquake Damage Assessment System. And these are the guys who, as Assistant Secretary Paolo just mentioned, do Hazard Hunter and GeoRisk and all these other apps that they've been continuing to develop. We work with Weather Philippines, which is a private weather company, teaching companies how to interpret weather reports. We then built our own emergency operations center in Clark, so we wanted to be outside of Manila in case of the big one. And this center is really dedicated to gathering all the data we can for training and for deployment and for scenario building for our companies and partners, LGUs, NGOs, national government agencies, all working together in this facility in Clark. So we're able to map typhoons, earthquakes, volcanoes. We track them in advance for typhoons, for instance, and issue advisories 5 days before a storm is to hit, and we start counting down. We're able to issue advisories to different companies so they can get their own people prepared. We've developed our own system for tracking not only storms coming in, but for also tracking our response, so we can pre-position goods if necessary. And then once goods are sent out, then we can also track where where the responses have gone to. And our responses are typically in the lifeline or utility industries, telecom, water, power, fuel, not too much on food right now, but a lot of logistics. So we work hand in hand with the government to move goods around. This is just some examples of where we are in 2019 so far as our activations and activities are concerned. So you can see we're very active. The Philippines is very active in terms of hazards and natural calamities. We have some major response efforts dating back several years, but I'll give you the last 2 years. And as we speak, we have a major operation going on right now in Mindanao, following the 2 earthquakes last week of 6+ magnitude for both earthquakes. So we depend a lot on data to prepare people to reduce their exposure to risk. Moving forward, we're looking at things like catastrophe bonds, which APEC Business Advisory Council is working on. with various governments, including the Philippine government, to try to thresh out what we can do together to create a catastrophe bond, not only for the Philippines, but actually for the Asian side of APEC. So similar to what's happening already with the Pacific Alliance with Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Peru. So kind of studying that model to see how it applies to the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's a very interesting sort of private sector initiative. And I think that the key word in Bill's presentation is data. And hopefully we can talk about that later on. So next I would like to introduce Wei Sen Lee. He's a scientific committee member of the Integrated Research on Disaster Risks.
Good morning. Thanks for organizer inviting me to join the event. My talk will follow Oliver and other colleagues mention about information intelligence-based disaster risk management. So I talk about data, talk about information communication. Actually, my job, I have to communicate with the different group. At the university, I'm the adjunct professor. At my office, I am disaster manager. On the APEC, I am the co-chair to Emergency Preparedness Working Group. So I got a lot of chance to talk with different stakeholders. Actually, from my office point of view, we try to think how we make science and technology for action, especially for disaster risk management. After a few years implementation, we think only science and technology, of course, we had scientific models, but those models had a limitation. We never had a perfect model. We never had a perfect forecast. So in recent years, we add another element, real-time monitoring, including a lot of sensors like rain gauge data, thermometers, even the water level gauge, and also the CCTV camera. In my office, we include over 16,000 CCTV cameras, so we can observe what happened outside. But recent years, we also think about some input from the social media. But if we have so many collections of data and also about the models, but we need have influence on decision maker. So in recent years, we also think about how we work with decision maker to bring in-time operation. So this is how we think science should bring like knowledge, like scenario, risk, and evaluation to help decision maker to understand situation. So we not talk very scientifically. So this is our model. We emphasize impact assessments is very important thing. We never talk about risk recent year because talking about risk to decision maker, they cannot understand what is meant by risk. We try to visualize it, so we turn into impact. Like typhoon, we might have the wind, we might have problem of rain. About the wind, we have storm surge, we had wind damage. About the rain, we have torrential rain with mudslide or the landslide. But very important thing, we have informed emergency responder about when, where, scale, and scope of impact. Based on information, they can do some deployment. They can have trust in science and technology. So it is the job for a scientist to learn how we speak decision-maker language instead of telling a lot of report, telling a lot of the parameters. So we also learn one thing very important about information. First of all, we think we need a cloud system to integrate every system. So right now at my office, we try to integrate one system, help a lot of government agencies. It's a very important thing because we learn a lot of problems because we don't have the common operational pictures. Without the kind of pictures, a lot of government agencies cannot speak on the same page. That means everyone cannot have good coordination. The last one, how we help decision maker to good decision. So this is my office model. Currently, we collect data, big data set, over 400 and more data set from 40 government agencies, free. They share with free. Of course, we can use those data for the publication, journal paper. But our idea is why not we bring action, especially applications. So for this picture, actually, I compare my office like Grab or Airbnb. My office, we don't maintain or any hardware, especially like sensors. Or sensors installed by other government agency. But we have information. We make use of information because we have information intelligence. We do the business. So it's a new model for a disaster management agency to think about how we make best use of information systems. So we call it kind of N-to-1 and one-to-many models. That means we collect any kind of the data sources, maybe traditional one, even non-traditional one, like from social media. But most importantly, through my office, we try to design what is true demand from the user end. For example, you show on the map, you see the network there. Maybe one end represents rain gauge data, but for a citizen, for a decision maker, even the same data of rain gauge, they need different information intelligence to action. For a citizen, they want to know flood or not, or where is the evacuation shelter. For a decision maker, they need to know when and where she or he have to do some deployment to reduce impact. So as the unified body, we must think at our end user. We call it end-to-end, actually multiple end-to-end users, a linkage to bridge information gap. So the channel one, actually a few years ago, since 2013, we start to introduce common alerting protocol to create open data. So we share the open data to a lot of private sectors, app developers. They can serve their customers. The second channel is we collaborate with Google Crisis Map. Why? You see, so many users receive information from Google system since 2014. Every year, over 15 users receive benefit from Google. Why? First of all, save bandwidth, because the government don't have big bandwidth. Second thing, we don't have educated people how to use Google Maps. So it saves the time and money in kind of good public-private partnership. And third channel is how we use the PWS, public warning system. During we switch the system from 3G to 4G, we input the laws into the contract that every contract should provide CBS free to our government and free to the end user. So right now, if you travel in Taipei, you might receive early warning about earthquake, maybe thunderstorm, and the channel 4 make most use of social media. Line is most popular instant message in Taipei. So we have the kind of the collaboration Line company. We open a channel online. So we started services last year. Right now we have 1.07 users follow our location base. We push alert over 30 different kind of messages. But do remember, we must innovate our thought. At the beginning, we provide pure text, but we don't think it's good for the end user. So this year we use cartoon to get easy impression to all users receive information. They will know what is our alert means. So last slide actually kind of brief summary about how we use science and technology to innovate disaster risk management. 15 years ago when I joined the business as a disaster manager, of course, we got a lot of imagination when I first joined EOC. I think very complicated system, a lot of monitor, a lot of dashboard like I can reading. But however, I was disappointed. It's a very traditional one, still paper map, still receive message from the fax. That's his experience, especially in 2004, only emergency responder took the lead in EOC. We don't have a lot of space to work in EOC because they think we talk too scientific. Since we use the science and technology and data to change the management, so they increase their risk understanding, so they love us. So scientists have the room in EOC, but we don't think that is enough. We must satisfy uncertainty during emergency management. So for this phase, we call it information phase. We must provide information intelligence for action. For this phase, we also include general public. We also embrace the trend of big data. And most important thing, we emphasize impact-based preparedness to solve the problem in advance. So this is some sharing about how we make use of science and technology for disaster risk management. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think you might have noticed that there was a lot of talk about data processing as it was within our framework. And so I think it's interesting. There's collection and then there's processing. So my final speaker is Thomas Kessler. He's a principal finance specialist, and in particular in disaster insurance at the ADB.
Good morning, everybody. I don't have a presentation, and I hope still that I can be as illustrative as my fellow panelists. I was really impressed about how you were showcasing the innovation and technology. And I also would like to take the opportunity to thank to OECD and Vivid for our cooperation. I think this is a very complex and very broad theme, and you have enabled actually to really systematize it and to show where innovation can be applied. So what I would like to do is to take a step back, and I would like to show, well, what is disaster risk management approach within ADB, and then how in this approach innovation is applied. The integrated disaster risk management framework is outlined in the operational plan 2014 and 2020. So it is here a while, and I think it will evolve going forward next year, and certainly also integrate some of the findings here. But so far, it's based on 3 pillars, and these pillars aim at providing financial and physical resilience of our disaster risk, of our developing member countries. And first pillar is implementing a wide range of policy investments and capacity development in order to reduce the risk. So a large focus is on risk reduction. Second, climate change and growing economic exposure need to be taken into consideration when we talk about risk reduction. So it's not only addressing the issue today, but it's also looking at how it will evolve tomorrow and in the future. And finally, important is to consider a wide range of disaster finance instruments that are available. So it starts with instruments to reduce the risk, to retain the risk, and then to transfer any residual risk. So we need to complement all these instruments at once. I would like to illustrate in one project which I'm currently working on, well, how we take into consideration these things. And the project is called Climate Resilience Inclusive Infrastructure for Ethnic Minorities in the southern parts of Vietnam. So it's a 140 actually standard infrastructure project, standard in the sense that's really what we are doing most, lending money for building infrastructure. But it comes with a grant of 12 million roughly. So the grant, really, a substantial amount will be spent on hydrometeorological stations or on sensors, on warning system, as well as buying additional data that complement these hydrometeorological stations. So these will then be used to design a more resilient infrastructure of these roads and bridges. And also, the data will be used to design insurance products for the communities and the minorities that are using these infrastructure. So we're talking a lot of farmers, and agricultural products will be developed using these kind of investment. And also, I forgot about it. But grant element will also be used in order to test technology that increases the resilience of infrastructure. One example concretely here is roads across mountains. And we found that, well, it's not sustainable to build these roads and to make them resilient to weather change. So why not build a tunnel? Now you will say technology to build a tunnel is nothing innovative, but well, in Vietnam it is actually. There's no tunnel, there's I think one tunnel. So this grant will allow some comfort to use technology also on infrastructure. Now, time is running, and I still wanted to say quite a lot. I mean, in our ADB operation, climate change has been fully integrated, and every project is screened for climate change impact. And we rate them low, medium, and high, and any project that is medium or high will be assessed what kind of technical and economic adaptation measures can improve that project, and such feasibility studies are implemented across the operations. Also, the use of satellite-based information and geospatial mapping has been fully integrated. So we have the chance to have entered a cooperation with JAXA, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, as well as with ESA, the European Space Agency. And we have some two great experts, and one of them I see here, Paolo, who has been seconded. The other one is Ko Hamonoto. I don't think I have seen him, but they have been seconded, and they help us to use space data and information. I give you a few examples how this work fits into our project. So for instance, it is used to improve resilience to flood in Calcutta, or design embankments walls of Cambodia. It has been used for the rehabilitation work of the city of Palu, Indonesia, after the tsunami. It also is used to identify landslide risk to irrigation infrastructure in Bhutan, excuse me. Then, as we heard, disaster insurance is an area we would like to push. So such information helps us to design agriculture-related insurance projects based on rice yields and other weather index parameters. So another step going forward is using the expertise of the disaster insurance industry in terms of modeling, CAT modeling tools. So that would be a step going forward in order to better understand risk, or the impact of risk, as Wei clearly say. So how do we calculate the economic impact, but also how do we calculate the losses, the life lost, exposed, and also what is productivity loss because people are affected by disasters. So these models help us to better understand that risk, but not only to understand it, also to understand what is the impact, the economic impact that disaster risk reduction measures will bring. And so it will make investment into such measures more incentivizing, and not only the investors but also the borrowers, will understand the need of going into that area. I will stop here by saying that technology and innovation is important, but it needs to be embraced in a multidisciplinary approach involving all relevant stakeholders. So it's the public sector working together with the private sector. I think academia is an important stakeholder not present here. But then it's about leveraging funds and multilateral platforms. And I think the MDBs like ADB can bring them all together. And hopefully in the following I will be able to explain a little bit more and to bring some more examples. But thanks very much for your attention.
So thank you very much, all speakers. So as I have the prerogative as a moderator, I'm going to pose each panelist with a couple of questions that come to my mind. Sonu and Bill, as part of the private sector, in terms of technology and innovation, has there been any government, may I call them, challenges in terms of regulation that has inhibited the development of your products? I think that's one of the questions I'd like to ask you to. Paola, I want to ask whether how in Philippines technology and innovation, how it has been incorporated in terms of your strategies for disaster resilience. And Wei Sen, perhaps I may ask you, because you mentioned big data, and I think the problem, well, not the problem, but one of the sort of challenges of big data is really the non-structured data. So how have you addressed that? Because it's very costly to actually process that data, and I think that's one of the challenges when you try to integrate it into your disaster risk management. And Thomas, you mentioned coordination, and so perhaps I may ask you, as you've been in the private sector as well, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges and bottlenecks in terms of coordination between the public and the private sector? And what do you think can be the ADB can do in terms of contributing? Maybe if we can just do a round of all these aspects. Do you want to go first?
So, no, so regulations and government policies do play a very important role. So, in India, for example, I found that the work done by government on documenting the KYC, the customer details of each farmer, and the development of or the digitalization of land records played a very or has played a very important role in for us or has helped us in developing more precise crop insurance or disaster management products. So the government policies and initiatives do play a very important role. On the other side, I would say the insurance regulations have been have to catch up a bit, you know, and that inhibits the development of new products. In several other countries, like in Bangladesh, where we have worked with ADB, we have found that non-availability of data, you know, plays a or inhibits development of disaster management products. So policies and regulation have a very crucial role and can play a very supporting role in development of products for disaster management.